Melody never imagined that the deepest wound she would ever endure would come from the person she trusted most. Installing hidden cameras in her own home had been an act of desperation, something she never thought herself capable of. But as the footage played back, her breath caught in her throat, her fingers trembling as she froze in disbelief. She had always been observant. Some might have called her overly so, but in recent weeks, the subtle changes she'd noticed at family dinners, weekend brunches, and casual gatherings became impossible to ignore. Lena, her lifelong friend who had once been like a sister, was behaving differently. At first, the shifts were almost imperceptible, tiny gestures, lingering glances, but they carried a weight only Melody could feel, a quiet tension that settled in her chest like a storm cloud. It was a Sunday afternoon when the pressure finally became unbearable. Sunlight streamed through the tall, narrow windows of their historic Charleston kitchen, glinting off the gleaming marble countertops and illuminating the soft patina of antique cabinets. Melody sat at the kitchen table, a half-empty mug of coffee cooling in her hands, the steam long vanished. Across from her, her husband Ethan laughed warmly with Lena, their easy camaraderie striking an uncomfortable chord in her chest. "What do you think, Lena?" Ethan asked casually, a small, almost mischievous smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Lena returned it, her gaze lingering a moment too long, her voice soft and measured. "I trust your judgment, Ethan. You always know what's best," she said, her words floating in the air like a delicate trap. Melody's chest tightened. The light, airy atmosphere of the room seemed to thicken, charged with something unnamed, something dangerous. Later, as Melody washed dishes in the deep farmhouse sink, she stole glances at them from the corner of her eye. Ethan and Lena were on the couch now, chatting and laughing softly. They weren't sitting close, yet there was a rhythm to their movements, a subtle intimacy that made her stomach twist. Ethan chuckled at something Lena said, and the look they exchanged was enough to make Melody clutch the dish so tightly that her knuckles turned white. "I'm just being paranoid," she whispered under her breath. But deep down, she knew she wasn't imagining it. That night, lying beside Ethan in their bedroom on King Street, Melody tried to sound casual. "Have you noticed anything different about Lena lately?" she asked softly, as if the question itself might be dangerous. Ethan looked up from his phone, genuinely surprised. "Different? No, why?" "I don't know," Melody admitted, her voice catching slightly. "She just seems closer to you." He chuckled and set the phone aside, the sound locking her doubts away with casual authority. "Honey, you know how Lena is. We're all close. Don't overthink it." Melody forced a smile, but the easy dismissal only deepened the unease gnawing at her chest. Lying in the dark, staring at the intricate molding on the ceiling, her thoughts twisted and spiraled. Maybe she was imagining things. Maybe she wasn't. The days that followed tested her sanity. Melody observed them constantly, every glance, every shared laugh, every subtle touch. There was no tangible proof, only hints and whispers of what could be happening, yet those whispers gnawed at her relentlessly. Nights became long and lonely, doubt a constant companion that grew louder with each passing day. She couldn't live like that anymore. And so she did the unthinkable. One night, after Ethan had drifted into a deep sleep, Melody slipped quietly out of bed. Her heart pounded so violently she feared it would burst through her chest as she retrieved a small, inconspicuous box hidden in the closet, a set of tiny security cameras she had ordered days earlier. She placed them in discreet corners of the house, one in the living room, another in the hallway, one near the entrance, and the last in the guest room, Lena's room. When she finished, a wave of guilt washed over her. "I can't believe I've come to this," she whispered, her voice trembling. But it was too late. She needed the truth. Days later, bracing herself with trembling hands and headphones snug over her ears, Melody sat before her laptop. At first, the footage seemed ordinary. Laughter, casual conversation, the banal rhythm of daily life. She almost convinced herself she had been imagining everything. Until she saw it. The night before, Ethan had walked into the living room, glancing around to make sure no one was watching. Moments later, Lena appeared behind him. "I thought you'd take longer," she murmured, her voice low and intimate. "Melody's busy with work," Ethan replied, a smile forming that twisted into something unfamiliar, almost cruel. Then came the touch, the hand brushing against his shoulder, the soft laugh that lingered too long, and finally, the kiss. Melody froze, breath caught in her throat, pulse pounding like a drum in her ears. The world seemed to crumble around her. This betrayal wasn't just physical. It was intimate, emotional, and profoundly personal. She pressed pause and stared at the screen, tears streaming down her face. Her husband. Her best friend. In her own home. That night, she lay awake beside Ethan, who slept peacefully, oblivious to the fact that his world had already begun to unravel. Lena moved through the house the next morning as if nothing had happened, her sweet voice and calm smile masking the betrayal she had just enacted. Every morning became a silent battlefield. Melody sat at the table, coffee trembling in her hands, fury simmering under the surface as she watched them. That morning, Lena was in the kitchen, chatting with Ethan as she poured coffee. Their laughter sounded like cruel mockery in Melody's ears. "Did you sleep well, Melody?" Lena asked, her tone sugary yet precise, a practiced concern hiding under the sweetness. "I'm fine," Melody replied, eyes glued to her cup, fingers gripping it until her hands shook. She forced herself to remain composed, to prevent herself from collapsing right there. The silence that followed felt suffocating. Lena and Ethan exchanged a conspiratorial glance, a spark in their eyes that only Melody noticed. A chill ran down her spine, and she hid her trembling fingers in her lap. The urge to scream, to lash out, threatened to consume her, but she restrained herself. A plan was forming, precise and deliberate. She would not act without purpose. That night, as Ethan showered, Melody perched on the edge of the bed, the dim glow of a lamp casting shifting shadows across the room. The betrayal had etched itself into her like a wound that refused to heal. How could they do this? She asked herself over and over. But the shock that once froze her now transformed into something colder, sharper, and more deliberate. When Ethan stepped out of the bathroom, towel in hand, Melody met his eyes with a composed expression, her heartbeat measured and deliberate, rehearsing calm. "Remember, our anniversary is coming up," she said, her voice light, airy, seemingly carefree. He smiled complacently. "Of course. I'm already thinking about how we'll celebrate." Melody returned a brittle, practiced smile, while the plan she had nurtured in the shadows tightened and solidified, forming with meticulous precision. In the days that followed, Melody's focus shifted from suspicion to strategy. Every word Lena spoke, every subtle touch from Ethan, fueled her anger while sharpening her mind. They remained blissfully unaware of the storm gathering silently around them. Outwardly, Melody's serene mask remained unbroken, but inside, a methodical, relentless storm raged, precise, patient, and unstoppable. That afternoon, Melody stood near the fireplace in the living room of her home, her gaze fixed on the flames as they danced and flickered, casting golden shadows across the polished hardwood floors. She had started the fire deliberately, hoping the warmth and glow would anchor her, offer some semblance of control. Yet the tension that hummed through the house made the crackling of the logs feel almost inconsequential. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked slowly, deliberately, each second stretching as though time itself had paused, holding its breath in anticipation of the confrontation she had long dreaded. Ethan and Lena wandered back into the room, their laughter soft but sharp, their whispered exchanges carrying like a knife sliding along Melody's ribs. Every giggle, every stolen glance between them, amplified the betrayal pounding in her chest. Melody closed her eyes for a moment, drawing in a deep, shuddering breath. Then she let the silence break with a voice that startled even her. "I need to talk to you," she said, calm but firm, deliberate. The laughter died instantly. Both of them froze, their smiles evaporating like shadows retreating from the sun. Ethan's brow furrowed, confusion flickering across his face. "What's wrong?" he asked, his usual charm faltering under the weight in her tone. Lena, normally poised and unshakable, stepped forward with a forced smile that didn't reach her eyes. Melody laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that carried no warmth. "I'm fine," she said, though the word curdled into something harsh. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Her words cut the air like knives. Ethan took an involuntary step back, uncertainty and a flicker of fear knitting his features. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his confident armor stripped away. Melody turned fully to face him, letting the truth she had carried in silence finally rise to the surface. "I know. I know about you and Lena. I know everything." Her voice quivered for a heartbeat, but the tremor was swallowed by an iron steadiness. Ethan went pale, while Lena stumbled backward, eyes wide, trapped as though in a net she could not escape. "It's not what it looks like," Lena stammered, reaching for some feeble excuse. It's not what it looks like," Melody interrupted, her voice bitter, tasting of raw betrayal. "You betrayed me under my own roof. You thought I was blind, a fool who wouldn't notice." Ethan lifted his hands in a placating gesture. "Please, let's talk." "It was a mistake." "A mistake?" Melody advanced, each step deliberate, her gaze piercing like shards of glass. "You destroyed everything. Our life, our marriage, our promises, what for?" She gestured toward Lena, who trembled under the weight of Melody's stare. "I never meant to hurt you," Ethan said, but the words sounded hollow in the heavy, suffocating silence. Melody laughed again, but it was a sound threaded with irreversible pain. "You hurt me," she said, icy precise, sharper than she even felt. "And there's no going back." Tears glimmered in Lena's eyes as she searched for an explanation. "Melody, you know how much I care about you. This wasn't supposed to happen. This wasn't a mistake," Melody snapped, her voice rising, slicing through the quiet like a knife. "Mistakes are accidental. You planned this. You laughed at me behind my back and still had the nerve to call yourself my friend." The room fell into an oppressive, almost tangible silence. Ethan opened his mouth, but Melody raised a hand, cutting him off mid-word. "I've made my decision," she said, her voice now a cold, unwavering whisper. "You didn't just ruin my marriage. You destroyed my faith in people. Now you'll face the consequences." Ethan stared at her, disbelief etched across his face. "What are you going to do, Melody?" he asked, low and almost pleading. For a fleeting moment, a memory of love flickered between them, but it was quickly extinguished by the darkness that had replaced it. Melody held a sealed envelope in her hand and set it firmly on the coffee table before him. Inside were the divorce papers, and she demanded that he sign them. At first, Ethan refused, trying to convince her it had all been a misunderstanding, a rough patch they could survive together. "You know you can't live without me," he pleaded. "I admit I made mistakes, but I never stopped loving you. Let's give us another chance." Melody's voice trembled, but not from weakness, rather from the searing heat of anger that burned from her chest. "Do you really think that after everything you both did, our marriage could ever be the same? You must be kidding. Get out of my house and don't come back. Do us both a favor." Ethan left, his luggage thrown carelessly into the trunk of his car, eyes hollow and void of hope. He didn't apologize. He knew no words could lighten the weight of his betrayal. One last plea escaped him, hoarse and almost desperate, as if trying to convince himself she was the one ending things. "I'm leaving, is that what you want?" he asked, lingering by the door. Melody's expression remained unreadable, her heart steeled by the fire of betrayal. "No, Ethan. This is what you chose. I'm just showing you the consequences." She closed the door behind him without a backward glance, listening to the sound of his car fading into the distance, forever. Lena faced a darker truth. She hadn't just lost a friend she had considered a sister. She had lost a home that had always felt like a sanctuary. "Please, Melody, don't do this to me," Lena begged during their final encounter, her voice trembling as her hands reached out, desperate to grasp at the remnants of her dignity. "You destroyed everything that mattered to me," Melody said, her tone cold and unyielding. "Don't expect me to do for you what you would never have done for me. Leave and don't ever come back." Lena collapsed to the floor, sobbing. "I know I was wrong," she cried, "but we were like sisters. Please don't do this." Melody sighed, her eyes hard and unwavering. "It's over. We're nothing to each other now. Get out of my house, and forget we were ever friends." The following days tested Melody's resilience. She buried herself in work, in the small rhythms of daily life, trying to piece together a future from the rubble of her past. Friends visited frequently, offering support, care, and gentle reminders that life could continue. One friend, Claire, a lifelong companion, came often. "You're strong, Melody," she would say, gripping her hand firmly. "No one should ever have to go through this, but you'll make it. You'll get through it. I just want it all to be over," Melody admitted one afternoon, staring out at the Charleston skyline, the sun glinting off the harbor like a scattering of shattered glass. "Everything reminds me of what I lost." Even as she worked to rebuild, the scars of betrayal lingered, the calculated revenge she had executed, cold, precise, unflinching, had left its mark not only on Ethan and Lena but on her as well. She had changed, forged in the fire of treachery, and she was no longer certain if that transformation had made her stronger, or if it had simply left her more alone. The nights were still difficult. Even months later, Melody found herself haunted by the memory of deceit, replaying every glance, every whispered word, every betrayal that had shattered her world. Sleep was a fragile thing, broken by dreams where Ethan's smile and Lena's laugh intertwined like poison, twisting through her mind with a cruel familiarity. Deep down, she knew that revenge had never been a cure for the pain. It had only fed the anger that gnawed at her heart, a relentless companion she could neither shake nor ignore. One crisp autumn afternoon, when courage finally outweighed fear, Melody decided it was time. She returned to the house where it had all begun, the house that had once been filled with laughter, sunlight, and warmth, now silent, empty, abandoned, much like the promises that had once seemed eternal. The sunlight slanted through the tall Charleston windows, highlighting dust motes dancing in the air like tiny memories she could no longer hold. Every creak of the floorboards beneath her feet felt like a whisper of the past, a subtle reminder of moments she wished she could forget. She moved slowly, deliberately, each step echoing against the wooden floors, her breathing deep and steady, grounding her in the present. In the living room, she paused, imagining the faint, ghostly echo of Ethan and Lena's laughter, mingling like smoke through the empty room. It was a phantom she needed to face, to exorcise if she ever hoped to reclaim herself. The fireplace still held the remnants of the last fire she had started in desperation, ashes scattered like fragments of a life that no longer existed. Melody knelt, letting her fingers sift through the gray powder, feeling its fragility. Each grain seemed to carry a memory, a hurt, a fleeting moment of hope turned to ruin. She closed her eyes and drew in a long, cleansing breath, letting it out slowly, feeling a small spark of something she hadn't felt in months, clarity. "I survived," she whispered to herself, the words trembling at first, then firm, like a declaration forged from fire and loss. "This doesn't define me anymore." When she stood, she felt a lightness she hadn't known in months. The house had once felt suffocating, each room a reminder of betrayal and heartbreak, yet now it felt almost hollow in a freeing way, like the air itself had been released from its weight. Maybe this was the end of that chapter. Perhaps the next one would be written differently, one filled with intention, strength, and care for herself. She walked through the rooms one last time, letting her fingers brush the walls, tracing the outlines of memories that could never be restored. The ashes of the past were still there, stubbornly present, but they no longer crushed her spirit. They were small, fragile reminders of what she had endured and, more importantly, what she had overcome. Stepping outside into the warm afternoon, Melody felt the harbor's distant waves shimmer under the sun, carrying a soft breeze that whispered of possibilities yet to come. The city smelled faintly of salt and falling leaves, of life continuing despite loss. Ethan had vanished from her life without a trace, and Lena, consumed by shame, had moved away, leaving no footprint behind but the echo of betrayal. But Melody had been reborn. She had learned that revenge never brings peace, but healing does. She had discovered a deeper strength, not the strength to strike back, but the strength to rise again, to reclaim herself, to rebuild from the ruins of heartbreak. Every heartbeat now carried a rhythm of resilience, every breath a quiet promise of renewal. Hope, she realized, is far more resilient than anger. It doesn't demand retaliation. It demands courage, patience, and the willingness to keep moving forward when everything seems lost. It is the gentle force that lifts you from despair, even when the shadows are long. And as Melody walked along the cobblestone streets of Charleston, the sunlight warming her face, she understood something profound. True hope always finds a way to rise from the ashes. And this time she would let it. You just heard this one from Stories by Sue. If it resonated, don't forget to like and subscribe. What are your thoughts? Share them in the comments, I'd love to hear. Thanks for watching.